Why don't you just cast me into the void and be done with it? The alien princess's voice was sharp, but there was a crack in it, a tremor of frustration. Her violet eyes, glowing faintly under the dim light of the grand chamber, betrayed her vulnerability. King Azor, a towering figure with glistening obsidian scales and a crown of energy pulsating above his head, narrowed his piercing gaze. He towered over her, his presence suffocating. "Do not tempt me, Seriya," he growled, his voice resonating like thunder. "You are my daughter, yes, but you are also the greatest disappointment of my reign. Weak, clumsy, and utterly incapable of carrying the weight of our lineage." Seriya clenched her fists, her claws digging into her palms. The words were not new, but they still cut deep. She looked up at her father, her body rigid but trembling. "Perhaps your expectations are the problem. I'll never be the warrior you want me to be because I refuse to be molded into your image." A low growl echoed from Azor's throat, and the energy in the room grew heavy. Just as Seriya braced for another scathing remark, he raised a hand, silencing her with a flick of his clawed fingers. "You are fortunate I have not given up on you entirely," he said coldly, "which is why I have procured something that may yet save you from your incompetence." Seriya's brow furrowed in confusion. Before she could question him, the chamber doors opened with a deep groan. 2 guards entered, dragging behind them a figure that looked small compared to their hulking forms. The prisoner's wrists were bound, his dark hair disheveled, and his clothes torn, but his eyes, sharp and defiant, immediately locked onto Seriya's. "A human? You brought me a pet?" Seriya's voice dripped with disbelief. "Not a pet," Azor corrected. "A teacher." The human laughed, a dry, raspy sound that echoed in the cavernous chamber. "Teacher? That's a generous title for a prisoner of war." Seriya's eyes darted between the human and her father. "I don't understand. What can a fragile creature like him possibly teach me?" Azor's lips curled into a sneer. "You will learn strategy, discipline, resilience. He comes from a species that has survived against impossible odds with none of the advantages you take for granted. If you cannot learn from him, then you are beyond saving." The human's smile widened, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Oh, this is going to be fun." The cell they had thrown the human into was dimly lit, with walls made of cold, unyielding metal. Seriya stood outside, her arms crossed, staring at him through the bars. "What's your name?" she asked, her tone curt. He leaned against the wall, the chains on his wrists clinking softly. "You can call me Noah," he said. "And you?" "Seriya." "Not that it matters." "Oh, it matters," Noah replied, his voice light but edged with something deeper. "You're the one who's stuck with me. Might as well get to know each other." Seriya huffed, her tail flicking in irritation. "Let's get one thing straight. I'm not stuck with you. You're here to prove my father wrong. To show him I'm not some lost cause." "Ah, so daddy issues." "Got it," Noah said with a smirk. Her claws scraped against the metal bars as she leaned closer. "You're awfully bold for someone in chains, and you're awfully defensive for someone who claims not to care what her father thinks," he shot back. Seriya glared at him, but there was something about his demeanor that threw her off. He didn't cower like others did in her presence. Instead, he seemed amused, intrigued, even. "Fine," she said finally. "If you think you can teach me something, then prove it. What's the first lesson?" Noah straightened, his expression turning serious for the first time. "The first lesson is simple. Strength isn't just about muscles or claws. It's about using what you have to its fullest potential. Tell me, princess, what do you think your greatest weakness is?" She hesitated. The question was unexpected, and she didn't like how it made her feel. "Why should I tell you?" "Because," he said, stepping closer to the bars, "if you can't admit your weaknesses, you'll never turn them into strengths." Days turned into weeks, and Noah's lessons began to take root. At first, Seriya resisted, her pride bristling at the idea of learning from a human. But Noah was relentless, challenging her in ways no one else dared. He taught her how to think strategically, using her surroundings to her advantage. When they sparred, He relied on speed and cunning rather than brute force, forcing her to adapt. And when she grew frustrated, ready to lash out, he made her confront her emotions rather than suppress them. Anger isn't your enemy, he told her one day as they stood in the training arena. It's a tool, but if you let it control you, you'll lose every time. Seriya's progress didn't go unnoticed. The other warriors began to whisper about her transformation. She moved with a newfound confidence, her strikes precise and calculated. But it wasn't just her physical abilities that had changed. Her mind had sharpened, her instincts honed. One day, after a particularly grueling session, she sat beside Noah in the training hall, both of them catching their breath. "You know," she said, glancing at him, "you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" he asked with a grin. "Someone fragile, helpless. But you're—" She struggled to find the right word. "Resourceful," he offered. She smirked. "Annoying." He laughed, the sound genuine. "I'll take it." As the days continued, a strange bond began to form between them. They were from different worlds, bound by circumstance, but in each other, they found something they hadn't known they needed. For Seriya, Noah was more than a teacher. He was a reminder that strength came in many forms. And for Noah, Seriya was proof that even the most rigid expectations could be shattered with the right push. The alien king watched from the shadows as his daughter sparred with one of the elite warriors, her movements a blur of speed and precision. She disarmed her opponent with ease, her victory met with stunned silence. Azor's eyes narrowed. Perhaps, he thought, there was hope for her after all. Noah's cell was no longer just a prison. Over time, it had become a place of conversation, strategy, and even laughter. Seriya often found herself there, long after training hours, asking questions or challenging his ideas. "Why do humans rely so much on strategy?" she asked one evening, leaning against the cool metal wall. "Because brute force only gets you so far," Noah replied. "We don't have your claws or your strength, so we have to outthink our enemies. Survival is all about using what you've got." "And what do you think I've got?" she asked, genuinely curious. Noah tilted his head, studying her. "Potential," he said simply. "But you've spent so much time trying to be something you're not that you've ignored what makes you unique." His words lingered in her mind long after she left the cell that night. For the first time, she began to wonder if her father's expectations were the wrong ones. Maybe it wasn't about becoming a perfect warrior, but about finding her own path. Weeks later, Seriya stood on the edge of the training grounds, watching the horizon. The air crackled with tension as the annual tournament approached, a brutal competition designed to showcase the strength of their kind. Winning wasn't just about glory. It was about proving oneself worthy of the king's favor. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" Noah's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing beside her, his chains gone. He had earned a level of trust that few prisoners ever did. "The tournament?" she asked. He nodded. "You should enter." She scoffed. "Against the elite? They'd tear me apart." "Maybe. Or maybe you'd surprise them," he said. "And yourself." Seriya looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "Are you trying to get me killed?" "No," Noah said, his tone serious. "I'm trying to help you prove that you're more than what they think you are. More than what you think you are." The day of the tournament arrived, and the arena buzzed with anticipation. Seriya stepped onto the sands, her heart pounding. She could feel the weight of every gaze, the judgment, the doubt. But then she saw Noah in the stands, his expression calm and confident, and she remembered his words. Strength isn't just about muscles or claws. It's about using what you have to its fullest potential. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next.